Welcome to the Room 1. Thank you for joining our wonderful session on climate-neutral territories. I hope you found introductory presentation very inspiring, and you can look forward to the rest of the day that we will find out so much more about what ESPON has planned until 2030, I'm sorry. We are all sorry that we are not in the wonderful Bled, but I do believe we are still with European spirit because you're joining us from all over Europe, and we can feel it here. We have very interesting workshop today, and each workshop will follow the same structure. But the basic content of the workshops is going to be the presentation from policy makers and the scientists or researchers. Each of these two groups will give their own point of view to the ideas that ESPON developed, and they will try to challenge some of these ideas. We are looking forward to hearing from you. What do you think about what ESPON has prepared, and where do you see the need for more evidence and knowledge gaps to be fulfilled? This is, as you know, in the heart of the ESPON program, and ESPON would like to talk first with policymakers and scientists, and then, of course, engage you into these topics. The point of the workshops, and why we call them workshops, even though in this challenging format, is that we want to engage into the broader debate. And it should lead to clear understanding of the needs and identification of activities on which ESPON should focus on. In order to achieve this, we need your help. And you have to be active, you have to engage. We know that online events are very challenging in these days, especially after 2 years of us meeting all the time like this. But this workshop will not be successful unless you actually tell us what you think. So please, we would like to encourage you to post questions in the chat. You can start actually right now posting questions. Ask questions, put comments, whatever you feel like adding, we are here to read from you. We have a very strong supportive team who are waiting eagerly for your questions, so keep them busy, please, in order to be successful with this workshop. As I said, every workshop that you will participate in today has the same structure. We have about 1.5 hours, and we will always start with a short introduction of the thematic action plan. This introduction will be by a colleague from ESPON EGTC. In a moment, I will introduce our colleague from ESPON EGTC. Then we will have the first round of input from policymakers and scientists on this particular topic on climate-neutral territories. And then we will have the round of reflection and comments where they can also pose questions to each other. And then we would like to hear from you. We would like to have debate with the audience. Therefore, please be active. I would just maybe briefly introduce all the speakers, just so you know what to expect. We first will have Marianne here, Marianne van der Herweyen from ESPON EGTC. As I said, she will introduce the thematic action plan. And then we will have 3 more speakers from different parts of Europe and presenting research point of view, science point of view, and also policymaker from the regional point of view. I will introduce them in a moment when they speak each specifically. And without further ado, I would give the floor to Marianne to present thematic action plan, climate-neutral territories.
Okay. Thank you, Ivana, for the introduction. The thematic action plan on climate-neutral territories. Why this thematic? Well, the EU is addressing climate change as a top priority with high urgency. And this step on climate-neutral territories has therefore taken the ambition to encourage and stimulate European territories to transition towards climate neutrality by 2050. This will be done by further developing the knowledge base with regards to the territorial aspects of a green transition towards climate neutral economy, and by looking into possibilities to transform climate change related challenges into opportunities. Through observations for the entire ESPON programme area, this TAP intends to provide new insights and possible pathways for all types of territories, to decrease carbon emissions, increase carbon sinks, create, enhance and manage green infrastructures, support the energy transition, a green digital transition, and a shift towards a green and circular economy. Can I have the... Yeah, thanks. A special focus will then be put on territories with additional challenges, such as low economic development, accessibility, or social disparities, and show these territories how they can take up a climate-neutral approach and at the same time address these challenges. Within this TAP, we also aim to focus on strengthening the capacities and skills of policymakers, and on all levels of governance and across policy sectors, in order to further integrate carbon-neutral territories in programming and policy-making processes. In addition, we aim to support the capacity development of different territorial actors in planning, managing, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating their climate-neutral territories. This current TAP on climate-neutral territories is of course tightly linked to the cohesion policy objective of greener, low-carbon Europe, to sustain policy actions towards a clean and fair energy transition, green and blue investments, and a circular economy, but also towards climate change mitigation and adaptation. In addition, there will also be a link to the objective of smarter Europe, in the sense of the green digital transformation, to a more connected Europe, in the sense of addressing sustainable mobility, and to a closer Europe, a Europe closer to citizens, in the sense of sustainable and integrated development. This TAP is also clearly tightly linked to the European Green Deal, in the sense that it will support Europe's endeavour to become the first climate-neutral continent. The TAP correlates very well with the objectives of the Territorial Agenda 2030, because it will provide support to its Green Europe objective by addressing a healthy environment, a circular economy, and more sustainable connections. And finally, it links to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development by supporting developments of economic growth that go in coherence with tackling climate change. Challenges that hinder a transition towards climate-neutral territories are mostly systemic in nature and cannot be overcome by individual organizations alone. One of these challenges is resource use. A green transition is very resource intensive, with a highly increased use of, for example, rare minerals, which are often mined outside of Europe. And this leads to the question, what options and limitations do we have to obtain the resources needed for a green transition from inside Europe? And what are the recycling possibilities of these resources from redundant products? Another challenge is that the green transition is not always very green. Bitcoins, for example, consume an enormous amount of energy, leading to the question, what can policy develop and use? How can policy develop and use a systemic vision, commitments of public entities and other stakeholders, and supra-regional cooperation, coordination and resource management to overcome these challenges? Another challenge is the need to increase the use of natural carbon sinks, such as parks, nature reserves, green roofs, etc. A major barrier to the deployment of these green infrastructure is that the relevant stakeholders do not sufficiently understand the way natural economic ecosystems function, how they can be identified, and how their benefits can be quantified. And this leads then to the question, how can planning authorities better and in a more consistent manner quantify and forecast the influence of their spatial planning policies on greenhouse gas emissions? Economic activity is a strong driver of energy consumption in all end-use sectors, and these end-use sectors, such as transportation and industry, still have a long way to go. One way to go is to decouple economic growth from resource use and transform the current economy into a climate-neutral and more circular economy. This approach is under debate, but that should not withhold ourselves from striving for an economy that ensures for everyone that everyone has access to education, healthcare, food, and a good quality of life, while staying in the ecological limits of our planet and restoring our fragile ecosystems when needed. The well-being and quality of life of citizens are affected, and therefore they should be encouraged to help drive the transition process. This leads to the questions how policymakers can encourage citizens' participation. How can behavior patterns be changed? And how can spatial planning support that they change? In addition, also the private level should be involved in driving the process. Many of them are willing to act themselves, but often lack information and tools. This leads to the question, how can policymakers encourage the private sector business directly before policy is put in place, which often takes some time. To understand trends related to energy consumption and production, ecosystem services, biodiversity and natural resources, time series of comparable subnational data at a long time is needed. And this is currently missing. To understand how a strategy impacts a region and can deliver benefits, one needs to build a mechanism for monitoring and evaluation. This also holds for learning and showing the benefits of implementing green infrastructures and using natural carbon sinks. Within the current consultation process, our aim is to exchange with the policymakers on their policy needs with regard to climate-neutral territories. Policy needs that ESPON could address. Therefore, we are very much interested to know from the policymakers among us, what are your main challenges and constraints for incorporating climate-neutral strategies in your territorial development strategies? What knowledge gaps do you have to prevent delivering a more effective policy response in relation to developing policies that lead towards climate-neutral territories? And what are actually the reasons for such knowledge gaps? Then we are also interested in behavior patterns. Do you have any suggestions on how policy, spatial planning, or soft cooperation can influence behavior patterns towards more climate neutrality? And what are your experience with encouraging the private sector business towards climate neutrality? In addition to the policy needs, we also need to review the state of the art of the existing territorial research in the field of climate neutral territories. We want to be fully up to date with the current status of research and are very much interested in territorial related research gaps in the field of climate neutral territories. To ensure the relevance and added value of ESPON evidence production, we want to collect a wide range of proposals for research activities. Therefore, we ask the researchers among us to help identify the gaps in scientific evidence. Does the current research on climate neutrality have a territorial focus? Does it demonstrate a wide territorial coverage? And what about the data and methodologies used? Are these solid? So please take this workshop as a first opportunity to share your information and ideas on the territorial challenges and evidence needs that you think should be included and addressed by ESPON. The consultation will continue after today until the end of February. So if you think of anything else after today, you can share your ideas and needs by sending us an email or by becoming active in our Yammer community for discussing and commenting our TAPs. And in this way, you can help us to shape the new ESPON program for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. I believe you found a lot of interesting information. But let's move immediately to the next speaker, where we will hear the practical side of this topic. I would like to invite Mr. Tamás Palvölgyi from Budapest University of Technology and Economics, who is joining us from Hungary. Mr. Palvölgyi.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Thanks, your patient. Thanks, Ivana. We got a wide cross-section picture about the TAP, the Thematic Action Program. And if I have the right, I would like to share my desk with a short presentation. I try to share my screen. Is it visible, my PowerPoint presentation?
It should be possible, yes.
Sorry? Is it okay?
We're just waiting for the confirmation. Yes, it should be. You should click it at the bottom and you'll be able to share.
Okay, I try again.
Yes, now we see it.
Okay. Did you see it? So is it okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
If you could just make it maybe in the in the presentation mode.
Sure,
yes.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
yes, perfect.
I think it is perfect. Okay, so thank you for my introduction, and many thanks for my invitation to have an intervention in this panel discussion on climate neutral territories. So first, I would like to start with the setting of the scene from my point of view. My presentation's objective is to provide an input for the consultation process in scoping and orientation of the climate neutral territories TAP. And I would like to put into the focus the identification of the needs from the research communities, needs from the policymakers, identifying the gaps, finding the possible way of partnership in municipal level and so on. So my first thematic suggestion is to enhance the territorial monitoring. And I believe that the first challenge ahead us is to identify the drivers and the impacts. So the evidences of climate change in municipal level. What does it mean? First, to get a clear and as much as possible real-time picture on the territorial or spatial structure of greenhouse gas emissions in various specific indicators. And the territorial structure of the decarbonization. For example, the progress in the mitigation policies or decarbonization targets and so on. And I think it's absolutely relevant, the importance of the knowledge on spatial structure on loss and damages. For example, the impacts on the ecosystems, the human health, the climate change negative impacts on infrastructure, floods, and so on. And I would like to highlight the importance of the cost figures. So in some practical decision-making needs information about the cost of the damages. And in the bottom of this slide, you can see a preview as only a demonstration from Hungary, a NUTS3 level distribution of the per capita carbon dioxide emissions on the basis of the counties' climate change strategies. The next important pillar, in my view, is the policy analysis. So the assessment of the territorial climate change performance. This is, I think, the second territorial challenge. And if we use a bottom-up approach, I think a relevant task is the collection of the informations and development of databases, for example, about the existing or planned mitigation and adaptation measures, collection and assessment of various policy documents, such as the Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plans, the so-called CCAPs, and the local climate change strategies and other relevant policy documents. And it is also important, I think, that to provide some possible early outcome. I mean early that the first phase of the implementation of our TAP, the identification of the territorial data needs. I think it is very, very important, even in the case of the less developed EU member states. So how the settlements or the municipalities provide necessary information for their policy making. And the second item in these policies and measures, territorial challenge, I think it's a triviality in our circle, that the territorial assessments, the so-called ESPON brand, so the evaluation of all information which is provided by the bottom-up approach, for example, a periodical evaluation in a 3 years period, case studies, EU-wide intercompetitions, and others. And I hope my voice is okay, because I hear some. Okay, so I think everything is okay. So the third pillar is the policy analysis. So how the territorial climate change performance, country by country or in EU-wide. First important challenges ahead us is the methodological development. So, for example, it would be useful to develop a methodology for the measurement of local green transition to circular and climate neutral economy. Sometimes the municipalities or the leaders of a city or a town use these words, that the transition to circular and climate neutral economy, but I think it would be important to provide indexes, indicators, and others to support these strong rhetorics. And another methodological challenge is the identification or estimation of the cost of the climate change, the social cost, the economic cost, ecosystem externalities. Of course, in fine spatial resolution as much as possible. And I would like to also raise the question of a possible Europe-wide climate change policy performance index. Would it be useful or not? And of course, we could identify a special focus on NUTS 3 level. I think this is the sustainable energy transition. I don't want to go into the details. You can see it in this slide. And at the end of my presentation or my intervention, that what are the policy needs? I try to raise a few questions. I think one of the most important questions that how the national climate policies could support the municipal level climate change policy making. In Hungary, we made some initial steps in this way. I think much more steps should be done. And another important question is that do we have enough information about the needs? About the needs municipalities from their governments. I think that a possible survey should be done. And equally important, the climate change mainstreaming, how the municipalities, how the mayor's office could integrate the climate change into their daily operation, day-to-day strategy making, or legislative activities. And finally, the knowledge transfer. So I am from the science side, and I attribute importance to the knowledge transfer to the policy. Firstly, I think the most important is the awareness raising of the decision makers, the policy makers. A lot of realization may be possible, webinars, clubs, dialogue platforms, and so on. I think also discuss the potential role of universities in local climate transfer. For example, open science sections. And I would like to stress again the importance of the development and sharing of the best practices, databases, policy prototyping, and other innovative solutions. And finally, which is I think the utmost aim of our activities, that how can we promote the development and operation of local climate neutral communities. So that's all my first thoughts about the issue, and I'm of course ready to answer for your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pavlovic. If you could stop sharing the presentation so we can see you again.
I try to stop. I am a bit uncertain.
Slowly.
Yes.
There's no stress. Just have to go to the bottom of the screen, and there's a share screen option, at least in English, and you can stop sharing.
Try again.
Now, we see you. Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Please stay with us, because we will be looking forward also to your opinion for other presenters. Once again, I would like to encourage our audience to start sending us questions in the chat, so we can also prepare our speakers for the answers. Thank you again, and now let's move to the next speaker. I would like to invite Mr. Mikhail Gonzalez Aguino, who is joining us from Basque Center for Climate Change from Spain, also for once more scientific research approach to the topic. Mr. Gonzalez Aguino, welcome. We don't hear you very well, or at all. No. Just a second. Let's see also from our side. Just a moment. Is your microphone on? Are you maybe muted? Or the computer? On the computer microphone as well, not just on the Zoom. Can you say something now? No, we don't hear you. Can you... If you go to the bottom left, and you can check which microphone you're using to be certain that you're using the computer microphone. Under audio settings, should be there. Do you see a little microphone? No. Can I suggest that we move to the next speaker and we try to solve the problem? Good. Okay. Thank you for the thumbs up. We will, in the meantime, try to solve the problem. No worries. It happens. We all live in these strange times. I would like to then invite Rose Power from Southern Regional Assembly in Ireland to join us and give us the policymaker point of view. Welcome, Mrs. Powell. Your presentation is on now. Ms. Power, do you hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, welcome.
Thank you very much. You might share my first slide.
Yes, just a moment. No, the other one.
Presentation.
Yeah. Sorry, we just have a little bit of a switch of speakers as you hear, so yes, now you're on.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Rose Power, and I am the EU Project Officer for the Southern Regional Assembly in Ireland. I predominantly manage low-carbon projects for the Southern Regional Assembly, and we are the regional tier of government and provide a link between our national government and our 10 local authorities. The Southern region represents 42% of the land mass and 33% of the population of Ireland. And the region has 3 cities, but it is predominantly rural. And our vision is to become one of the greenest, innovative and livable regions of Europe. One of the first challenges that we're facing is to reduce emissions by 51% in our region by 2030, at the same time as our population is predicted to grow by 23%. As can be seen in slide 2, we therefore need to link sustainable urban development and compact growth and ensure we reduce the travel demand from our citizens. Our regional spatial and economic strategy outlines a number of policy objectives in this area, including increasing densities in our cities and towns, creating a holistic approach to deliver infrastructure requirements to assist in regional decarbonisation. However, to implement these strategies, we need more data. We need density maps for our 3 cities and our 14 key towns, providing us with a comparison between 2010 and now, and also comparisons with other European settlements of similar sizes. This evidence would firstly identify for us where progress has been made and what has worked well, and allow us to create a roadmap for future sustainable planning and development in order for us to be able to manage the predicted growth in population by 2030. Our second challenge is the identification and reduction of energy poverty. 8.6% of the population of Ireland experienced arrears on their utility bills. And given many homes in Ireland use oil and solid fuel, which is paid up front, this figure is likely to be underestimated. As you'll see in the slide, 14.8% of the population have energy expenditure below half the national median, which could be an indication of even further hidden energy poverty. Our regional spatial and economic strategy includes objectives to improve energy efficiency, retrofitting inefficient properties, and renewable energy generation, which is welcome. But there are some segments of our society that need more support and in order to be able to transition to low carbon. We know energy poverty is a combination of low incomes, inefficient homes, and high energy prices. And given the recent significant energy price increases we are experiencing, we expect that this will push even more of our citizens into energy poverty. To identify and reduce energy poverty in our region, again, we need more data. The EU Energy Poverty Observatory produced energy poverty indicators for all member states. However, this data is not linked to the location, the heating systems, or the energy efficiency of the buildings. In addition, we also have a knowledge gap on how we can overcome data protection restrictions in our region on gaining access to information that might help us better to identify energy poverty households. This data and knowledge could assist us in targeting our limited resources to households who most need our support. Our third challenge is the reduction in emissions and journeys in the freight and delivery sector. In Ireland, transport emissions represent 20% of all emissions, and Ireland has the 4th highest level of transport emissions per capita in Europe. You'll see from the slide that transport emissions in Ireland increased by 136% between 1990 and 2019. This is significantly higher than the EU average, which showed an increase of 20% during this same period. Our regional, spatial and economic strategy has an objective to develop regional straight strategy to assist in decarbonising the transport sector by reducing journeys and emissions, and the development of local transport plans that create 10-minute cities and towns, whereby all essential services are within a 10-minute walk, cycle or public transport connection. To reduce these journeys and emissions in the freight sector, we have an evidence and a knowledge gap that we must first address in order for us to be able to progress regional decarbonisation. We need data on postal deliveries, in particular unused capacity in our rural areas, to see if this unused capacity could be used for other purposes. For example, the delivery of pharmacy prescriptions to reduce journey numbers. We also have knowledge gaps on how to undertake the process of creating logistic hubs outside our three cities, and how we could potentially onboard the private sector and implement these logistic hubs on a practical basis. The evidence and knowledge could then be incorporated into our regional freight strategy to allow us to progress the use of unused capacity in our region, and also to reduce the freight in our cities. The final challenge I want to discuss today is that of carbon capture. Historically, 80% of Ireland was covered in forests, but this is just 11% at this point in time, one of the lowest in Europe. In addition, Ireland is an agricultural nation, and agriculture accounts for 37% of Ireland's emissions. You'll see from the slide, we also are an island nation surrounded by seas, with all of our cities located on the mouth of rivers that join these seas. In our regional, spatial and economic strategy, we do have an objective to decarbonise the agriculture sector and to embrace innovative carbon capture. However, we don't have any evidence to create the necessary strategies to decarbonise our agricultural sector as yet. We need average emissions per hectare and per head of livestock for both beef and dairy farming that are predominantly grass-fed, and also the level of carbon capture per hectare that could be captured by planting forests on some of this agricultural land. In addition, as an island nation, we don't currently have the knowledge to know how we could potentially use maybe seaweed, which is very fast growing, as a means of carbon capture for our cities. With this data and knowledge, we can engage with our local authorities and national government to raise awareness and to create policies that would encourage the use of carbon capture in Ireland to a much higher level. So in summary, we have four big challenges that we're facing in our region. We need to reduce emissions through higher density compact road in order to cater for predicted increases in our population up to 2030. The second one is the identification and reduction of energy poverty as energy prices continue to increase. The third is a reduction in emissions and journeys in the freight and delivery sector to utilise unused capacity and to reduce freight in our cities. And the last one is to reduce emissions from agriculture through carbon capture and reforestation, and harnessing the seas surrounding our island to capture carbon from our cities. So thank you for listening to my input statement from the southern region of Ireland, and I'll be happy to take questions later.
Thank you very much. Quite interesting presentation. But let's move immediately to our old speaker, Mr. Mikhail Gonzalez Aguino. I do believe that we solved the problem of the microphone, and if you are, yes, you're here, welcome again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Thank you, and sorry for this inconvenience.
No problem. It happens all the time, trust me. So yes, you're coming from a Basque Center for Climate Change, and floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivana. So yes, my name is Mikhail Gonzalez Aguino, and I am a researcher at the Basque Center for Climate Change, which is located in Bilbao, in the Basque Country. And I'm gonna give you some reflections on the research agenda that we have here at the Basque Country, and I think it could be also relevant for other territories or regions and for the ESPON agenda. So I will try to share my screen, although I send
you don't need to share the screen, we see your presentation.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay. Okay. So I will, and can I pass the slides, or will you do that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great. So actually, well, when I received the invitation and the idea of having a 10 minutes talk, I tried to think about ideas that can be hopefully relevant, but a few ones, because it's very difficult to cover many things in just 10 minutes. So I will focus on 3 key risks that different regions at the European Union is facing now. So, and I wanted to start with of course, with the opportunity message that is implied in the Green New Deal. This is something that those that have been working on the opportunities of the green transition knows very well. So the European Union faces a great opportunity in this transition towards a low carbon economy. And as you can see in the screen, in the presentation, according to the documents of the European Commission, we can create around 5,000 jobs in the European Union along this transition. And why is that the case? So in the next slide, you can see also another report from IRENA, the International Energy Agency on renewables, that is also getting the same message, the great opportunities that Europe, especially in the southern regions, but also in the rest of the European Union, can be achieved. And the reason is in the next slide, and is related with the heavy increase in the cost of renewables in all parts of the world, but that translates to our region. So as far as we can use these renewables and we have a space, we have a place to accommodate these renewables, this is a competitive advantage for many regions that can translate later on employment and on GDP increase. But the opportunities we know are there, and so I'm more interested in the risks or the let's say the challenges that some regions have. So in the next slide, I will start with the first one. So we all know that these jobs are real, and I'm sure they are going to happen, but we have to consider that they are going to be distributed quite unequally among different regions within the European Union and also globally. So the first challenge is what to do with this. And the next slide. The first challenge that I think we have to make some progress on research and also on policy making is on how we promote the industrializations of many territories and many regions along Europe that doesn't have the same industrial level that key regions have now. You can see there, for example, the Basque Country is in a good position in that respect, and also different parts of Germany and Italy. But in many other places of Europe, this is not the case. So one key aspect for policy making here will be how to increase and how to progress on the industrializations of those regions that currently are not with high levels of industrialization. So that is something to make research. The next question that I think is important in the next slide has to do with the different situations in some territories in the European Union. You can see in the left part of the slide some regions that can be considered to be in decline in the sense that have sectors that we need to be in decline. So fossil fuel and coal mining are sectors that we know that have to give space to other sectors on renewables. So here there is a question on how we deal with the just transition in those regions and how we really can implement policies that create new jobs, not promises of new jobs, but really innovation, social innovation that can make these key vulnerable regions to increase the employment in the future. And in the right part of the slide, you can see a different picture. So here you can see those regions that have a high percentage of the GDP on sectors that are very energy intensive, so they are harder to decarbonize, and also in the automobile sector, which is going to be also very important in this transition. So the second research agenda that I think is very important to consider in these regions is how to help these regions to make the transformation. So those jobs that are going to be created in Europe are really happening inside those regions. So they are not happening elsewhere, in the case, for example, of the automobile industry. So these are the two key questions, I think, and both, for example, are very important in the case of the Basque Country. And the third question that I wanted to raise in the next slide is the issue of the political viability of the energy transition. You all are aware that we are living now in the middle of the energy crisis with increasing price of gas, of CO2 that is translating to the price of electricity and to households. So there is a risk that this could increase the difficulties that some territories and some regions and some countries are going to face to implement climate policies if people oppose to these price spikes. So, and of course, this is on top of the already, let's say, different GDP per capita in those territories. This is an important disparity. So for me, this is important to research and to work with policymakers in designing policy packages that can make this energy transition to be more equal for society. So we have to design compensation mechanisms in those regions that really can make people to support the climate policies that we need. So this is, for me, the third challenge that we are facing currently in our societies. And that was just three examples of the research agenda that I think is important for the regions in Europe and for the territories. And I will be happy to comment further during the next hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It worked, so it was very good. We are receiving many questions at the moment, so please stay with us. And thank you also for asking questions to our audience. Just before we start asking questions directly to our speakers, I would maybe like to ask you, do you have any initial reactions to the interventions from your colleagues, from any of our three speakers, if anybody would like to say something? Maybe if I could start this time with the lady and ask Ms. Power if she would like to maybe have some reflection on what other speakers presented to us today. Hello? Yes, we see you. Just a moment, the sound is... Now should
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you. Sorry, each time we turn off, we can't unmute ourselves. We need the host to do it for us. Yeah, I think what was very interesting from the other speakers, coming from the university sector and the research background, all three of us mentioned energy transition and energy poverty, and that links in with the whole just transition. So it's obviously a common denominator, both from a policy perspective and from a research perspective. I suppose what I would say from the policy perspective, from our perspective here as a regional authority, it's important for us to actually get evidence and research and data that shows us a cross-section of our region. Most of the data that's collected or produced or shown to us is at a national level. And within each territory, there are significant variations in what's required, both from a policy perspective and a research perspective. Within the region that I'm coming from in Southern Ireland, like we have 3 relatively small cities, and then the rest is predominantly rural. So having national statistics and research, or even overall regional research, doesn't help us to direct our policy changes and improvements to address climate neutral policies specifically. So I think from that perspective, just taking on board that when we're looking at territories, there are diverse requirements even within the territories, and sometimes the research and the data needs to get below that NUTS 3 level, say, and needs to look at it further.
Thank you. It's a very good point that energy poverty was obviously a common denominator for everybody. Maybe now asking Mr. Palvilji, do you have any comments on the other speakers?
Do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So I think that I heard 2 very inspiring presentations or interventions. To Rose's presentation, I would like to highlight the strong emphasis of the energy poverty. I think in Central and Eastern Europe, it is also a very, very relevant issue. So how the energy policy making in local level could embed the issue of the energy poverty. I think some analytical input from the ESPON would be useful to integrate the energy poverty in the local energy policies. In Mikhail's presentation, I would like to highlight the interconnection of energy transition and industrial competitiveness. So I think this is a terra incognita, the issue of terra incognita. So how the industrial or even the in the economic level competitiveness interact with the energy transition. And I think that this issue is closely interrelated with the municipalities' view on the future. So how leaders of a town or a city imagine the future, and certain analytical input to this scenario-based viewing the future could be also useful to find the sustainable energy transition and decarbonization pathway to the municipalities. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. I would then ask for the final round, Mr. Gonzalez Aguino. What are your views? Do you have anything to add and reflect on?
Well, I agree what my co-speakers have said on the energy poverty issue, which I think is going to be critical because if the people doesn't get the benefits of the energy transition, especially vulnerable groups, it's going to be very difficult to make progress at the speed that we need to achieve the Fit for 55 package, for example. And also, I appreciate the comment from my colleague Paolo Rogbi on the municipality aspect of this energy transition. I was focusing more on the regions and territorial level, but of course, many things are going to happen at municipal level. And also the combination of mitigation and adaptation, the cities are and the municipalities are one of the key actors that can handle both challenges at the same time. And finally, if there is one question in the chat, so I may take the freedom to respond on the issue of energy security, and I think that question is very important because now we are facing a challenge with the energy crisis, and of course we cannot solve that in the short term, but we know that the renewables and the transition to clean renewables energy is the way of dealing also with energy security in the European Union. So there are many reasons now for decarbonize quickly, and of course climate change is the key reason, but also if we want to have more independent in the terms of our energy sources, that's critical. So I agree with the comment of Barry Garma, which put that comment in the chat. So that's all from my side, but happy to take more questions if you want.
Thank you. Yes, please stay. And also thank you for making a smooth transition to the next part, which is questions from the audience. And also you used the key words just a moment ago mentioning municipalities and mitigation, because we have a first question, and I think this is for Mr. Palvigi. Should ESPON coordinate with the Covenant of Mayors to make use of the SECAP umbrella? Should adaptation be included in a thematic action plan because mitigation is the key to achieve carbon neutral economies, and adaptations are needed at the local level? What do you think about this? Just a moment. Now you can speak. No, just a moment. There are a lot of challenges.
So
yes, now, perfect.
Thanks. I only could stress again the importance of the interaction between the Covenant of Mayors and ESPON. So the CCAPs form a very, very appropriate database for the further analysis. So I could only suggest to set up institutionally a close contact with the Covenant of Mayors and get the relevant data for further analysis.
Thank you. That was short and to the point. We have a next question. It's quite long, so I have to read it carefully. What about combining climate neutrality aims in the policy scene with recently increasingly important affairs such as security, military security, or pandemic situation? Replacing nuclear and coal energy with natural gas has increased EU dependency. Pandemic has increased the distant work, reduced office space, and this might considerably reduce community and energy consumption. Who do we think is the best person to answer this? I need to consult the colleagues, or is there any of you who would like to say something?
Hi, Rose here from
Perfect, Rose. Thank you.
From the southern region. I don't disagree with all of the comments that the person has shared in relation to the issues, and I think what's important here is, I think at a regional level, that we have an appreciation at a high level for all of the areas that we must address, but we need to actually be focused in on specific areas with specific evidence and research to back that up, because what that gives us then is the credibility and the backing to change policies on the ground. Without the evidence base and the analysis undertaken by our colleagues here from third level institutions and universities, we don't have the credibility to go to our elected representatives to ensure that we can create policies that actually address these issues. So I think, we can look at everything, in its entirety as a climate neutral territory, but within that you have to get beneath all of the individual strands that have to be addressed and combined to come up with an overall solution.
Thank you. Maybe a comment from any of the other speakers on this question, because I find it also a quite interesting way forward. If not, I would have another question for our university speakers, our research speakers. Do you think that already available evidence that has been collected over the years is up to date, or does it need revisiting, or are there any challenges and trends that need to be seen again from another perspective, considering that the world has changed significantly in the past couple of years? Do we have a volunteer? Well, maybe then I will call on the volunteer. I apologize for this. Maybe Mr. Gonzalez, Aguino, would you care to comment on this? And then maybe afterwards we can ask Mr. Palvegi.
Thank you. With question, I think, research is always research. We are always trying to find new answers because the questions are constantly changing. So, of course, we don't have all the evidence that we need for the challenge that we mentioned today, and we have to keep on trying to find new evidence. For example, on the things that I mentioned and my colleagues mentioned today, on the cities, municipalities, on the energy poverty. So, of course, there is much more things that we can do. And for example, I think one example we mentioned today, the energy poverty issue, and it's something that we work at the Center for Climate Change. And I think there is a space to make a contribution and a more granular detail of the energy poverty at municipal and region level. So most of the analysis are done by states, but those that face the problems are sometimes the municipalities. So, for example, that is a case where we for sure need more evidence on how this is affecting to specific locations. But sure, we will need to keep on doing new research on many of the topics that we have discussed today.
Thank you. Mr. Palvegi, would you like to comment, or we can move already to the next question?
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to add something. So I think that the evidence-based policy making at the level of the municipalities should be, I think, a learning process. So I believe that in some countries, even in the less developed EU member states, this kind of innovative making is a brand new idea. So we could find a proper learning phase to show the the advantages of the evidence-based policy making in the municipalities. I think that ESPON could participate on it to provide webinars, good examples, recommendations, how could implement the science-based or evidence-based decision-making. We good experience in Hungary in case of some small towns, municipalities. How could they open their door to the scientific information? So I think that the potential is great, and in case of good practices and practical and useful information, we could deploy this potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to move then to the next question or comment, but it's actually quite interesting topic. Achieving neutral territories is a long-term process that requires changes in society development and changes in the personal lifestyle. How can these behavioral changes be supported by sectoral policies and spatial planning policies? The question is also, do we need different governance models? I think there's also a link to the workshop which is taking place right now in room 2 about governance of new geographies. So I think this is also very important to find the links between different thematic action plans. Who would like to comment on this?
I don't mind commenting on this coming from a regional authority. I suppose here in Ireland, I think it's important for everyone to understand that within each jurisdiction, the governance model is different throughout the EU. And I think understanding how that governance model works can hopefully lead to better use of evidence and better direction that engages with citizens on the ground. And one of the ways that we've done it here in Ireland is we commissioned as a regional entity a transport consultant to look at the concept of a 10-minute city or town within our region. And we tested it on 3 key towns. But what we did with the information then, once we had mapped our key towns, was we set up, or in the process of setting up, a regional learning conference for all of our local authorities to attend. And the national government will also be there, the National Department of Transport. So we're bringing from the national level and bringing the local level on board to see the evidence as to why this concept and this framework and this tool that we've developed can benefit them as part of their strategy to reduce CO2 emissions in their cities and in their key towns in order to encourage more active travel. But as part of that initiative, there's also the requirement on the local authority to engage with the citizens before any infrastructure changes take place, to engage with them as to what would work best, engaging to find out that we're not actually creating changes that is not useful or beneficial to the citizens, and making sure that whatever we do is accessible to everybody. And I think by bringing on board the citizen engagement at a very early stage and listening to their input, I think that has the most impact on creating a platform where behaviour change can actually take place. We can't, as regional authorities or local authorities or even national authorities, we can't just be creating changes because we think we know best. We have to listen to the citizens who we are delivering these changes for and these improvements for, and be able to provide them with the data that shows them why we need this change, how this change will ultimately benefit them, and how going forward we can support them in moving their behaviour in that direction. But it can't be imposed. It has to be in collaboration.
I think that's a key word here. And also considering that ESPON is a cooperation program, collaboration and cooperation are a solution to everything, I would say. Thank you. There is a suggestion what a thematic action plan could include. and should consider in the future. And I find it personally, at least, extremely relevant. Inclusion of challenges like natural disaster should be considered for thematic action plan. EU countries are exposed to climate change and natural disasters, and we have seen just in this year that many countries have experienced quite dramatic changes because caused by the climate change. So direct and indirect impact on physical, social, economic, and other aspects of everyday life requires immediate but also long-term measures and reflection in policies. Maybe I would pose this question actually to our scientific part of our speakers. If you would like to comment on this, if you have any ideas how this could be taken on board from your experience. Let's start maybe with Mr. Gonzalez, since you're coming from the Climate Research Center.
Yes, happy to take this question. So yeah, I think that is something that can be done very well at the territorial level. So, and I think it's something that the research community has been doing for a long time to collect the data on different natural disasters, but also now more and more in relation with climate change, especially with droughts and fires in the south of Europe. So I think it's a good comment, and I think more research on that will be very important in order to raise awareness about how much climate change is affecting us, with putting numbers on that, not only physical but also monetary terms to those damages, and it will be very helpful also to in case compensations are needed. No? This is, as you know, something that is being very relevant in the climate change negotiation at the COP26, the loss and damage mechanism. So to be able to have that mechanism in place also within Europe, of course, we need more research on that. Although, as I have said, there are many databases that cover that type of impact, for sure, at the European level.
Thank you. We have actually also a suggestion from the knowledge about the knowledge gap for local authorities. I think this goes in line with think globally, act locally mantra that was used at least in the 80s, I believe. So climate impact at global level are well investigated, but from the point of view of local authority, what will be the impact on their territories? Climate change at local level could lead to very different impacts, both from quantitative and qualitative perspective. And this is the gap of knowledge that may be addressed by a thematic action plan. Would anybody like to comment on this?
Ivana, is it possible to add something to the previous?
Of course, yes, of course. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So I absolutely agree with the view of Mikhail. Really very important, the integration of the loss and damages into the assessments. And I would like to stress again the importance of the cost figures. So sometimes the municipalities would like to get clear information, clear estimation about the possible costs of the damages. So I think we have, how can I say, a possible economic size to provide them euros, cost figures. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. So coming back to the question of maybe, I'm sorry, but I think that maybe Ms. Power is the best person to answer the question about local authorities, even though you're regional authority, but at least you are on the local level.
Yeah, I do agree. There is obviously a requirement to provide specific evidence for local authorities And I think the starting point is having a base case. In a lot of these climate initiatives and decarbonisation initiatives, we expect as a regional authority that our local government and our local authorities will actually undertake these changes. But you need to give to them some sort of assessment of the impact it will have on the ground for them. So I think it's very important that, first of all, ESPON could provide base case scenarios for a number of different strategies, and then allowing them then to pick the strategy that is going to have the most impact on the ground, and providing that level of evidence and data to them. And it could be, I don't know if you chose, we mentioned energy poverty, but it could be carbon sinks, it could be any element. But if you don't have a base case scenario, you can't even estimate what the impact of the initiative you're looking at is going to achieve. And without having that level of data and evidence to back it, you won't be able to engage with your political and elected members to garner their support for the initiative, because you've no evidence to show that this is something that should be prioritised up the list in relation to something that should be undertaken. So I absolutely agree. And I think there is, you know, I know we keep talking about evidence gaps and knowledge gaps, but I think it's vast when it gets down to specific local areas and local authorities. That level of data is just not available.
Thank you. Very important point. We have a next question, comment, suggestion. The changes need to be related to new value chains, since people and local authorities' workload is increasing, but the cost payment is still the same. And this requires a holistic, integrated approach. Can ESPON include this in a thematic action plan? Perhaps it is a question for ESPON rather than one of our speakers.
Well, we take all the suggestions and comments up, and in the end, it's probably the monitoring committee that has to decide on the actual TAP. So we will for sure consider it in the TAP when we further develop it.
Thank you. Maybe I think somebody wanted to say something. I heard a sound from one of our speakers.
Well, maybe I can chip in. So I think this is a relevant debate, the one that is raising this person on how we finance municipalities. I don't know in other countries, but in Spain it's also now very important in the agenda, because that is true. So the finance to municipalities has been constant over time. And the work that they have to face, especially in Spain with increasing inequality and many aspects that has led the municipalities to take more things on their agenda, no? Probably deserve to think more carefully how we finance these municipalities. But I think this is a difficult question to respond, because in each country is, I think probably is very different how these arrangements are established. But certainly I can only say that in Spain is a very hot topic now.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think from an Irish perspective, I agree with the speaker and I agree with Mikhail. All of our local authorities from a resource perspective are at their maximum capacity. And we as a regional authority are pretty much in the same position as well. Everybody is more than 100% utilised. But I think, maybe when ESPON is looking at engagement with regional and local authorities, that they build in some sort of funding to assist with the local authority coming on board to give up their time from other areas. Maybe that's some way of looking at it. I think we as a regional government also need to be sharing that with our national government, which we do in relation to the funding that comes downstream to at regional and local level. But it's definitely a challenge. And I do think everybody is putting their best foot forward insofar as they can. But I think we as a regional authority here, if we can garner the information and we can probably disseminate it more efficiently to our local authorities. So maybe that's a way or a process around it.
Thank you very much. I think we are coming slowly to the end of this workshop on climate neutral territories. Thank you to all our external speakers, I would say, because we have one here in Luxembourg with us. We opened this public consultation for all of you, and thank you for the audience for also being active with questions. Please stay with us also in the second workshop. But now I would like to give floor to Marian to actually conclude.
Thank you, Ivana. Yes, a lot of aspects and elements have been addressed in this 90 minutes of the kickoff of the Territorial Action Plan of Climate Neutral Territories. And I can mention a few of them that were particularly important and coming back as well quite often, which is the need to, for the municipal level, to engage and to be supported with data, but also with developments in relation to climate neutrality. And the different aspects that were mentioned were, for example, energy poverty, transport emission reductions, but also carbon capture. And also especially addressing also regions in decline and at risk when the process of decarbonization is taking place. Looking also at the costs that it take to decarbonize the regions and territories. And well, engaging the citizens and the local level and communes to be part of this process, because without the citizens, this will not work. Yes, I think that is it when reading my notes further. But this is, of course, what was said already in the beginning. This is just the kickoff of the consultation period, and it will last till the end of February. So if you have any ideas that were not addressed or that come up in your mind when you are sleeping in the evening, which appears to me very often, then just join us, send your ideas by email to the address that is given on the ESPON website, or join us in the Jammer and discuss also with the other people that are active there. And I hope to learn from you all in this consultation process and develop a solid thematic action plan.
Thank you. Maybe just an extra comment, keep the notepad next to your bed if something comes up to you in the sleep, so you can write it down. Yes, so thank you actually also to the supporting team. As you can see, there are always challenges with online events, but I think we mastered it quite well. So we will conclude now with the workshop on the climate neutral territories, and we have a break until 16:30, until 4:30. Please stay with us. I promise you that also the other two workshops in the afternoon will be very exciting and interesting. In this room, room 1, we will have a perspective for all people and places thematic action plan, and if you are interested in this topic, please join us again in room 1. Otherwise, at 16:30, you will be able to join the room 2. Thank you very much, and if you join us later, see you again.